So right now, let me just start with a little bit of a disclaimer. Especially if you're new, today might be a little bit different. So this week, you're going to get sort of like under the hood view of how the church actually works. And sometimes
recording in progress.
And sometimes, that's all right. And sometimes it's not what you think. Or it's not even the main players that you think make the church work. And as the sermon progresses, you get an idea of how the church works. So if you're new, just take this sort of like as a sort of like you're just sitting in and just kind of listening in to what's happening. And maybe as you listen to how the church kind of functions, that you'll be actually drawn to it. But anyway, so as we start our sermon, just look at that first slide there, which is, do you have any useless talents? I have two. Off the top of my head, I can think of two. I'm not going to do it, my wife is laughing right now, but I can roll my tongue, so about 65 to 85% of people can do that, but some people cannot. So I feel kind of proud about that. And then the other talent that I have is I can wiggle my two ears simultaneously at the same time. I'm not going to do it because I just look goofy doing it. But that's a useless talent that I have. But I wonder about you guys. Does anybody want to share a useless talent? Don't be shy. All right, I thought this might happen. So I scoured the internet to find some useless talents. So I've got 5 for you. So there's this one. So some people don't get brain freeze. So actually that's kind of like a useful talent, isn't it? Because we all like ice cream, right? Then the next one is this one. Some people can get that USB in at the first time of trying. Especially like the mini one, they just get it first time. I don't know what advantage they have over us who get it on the 3rd, 5th, But and then the next talent is this one. Can you see that pinky finger there? Some people can kind of bend it. I know you guys are trying to do it, right? That person can do it, but I don't know what use that is. And the next one is this one. You can hold a dozen eggs in one hand. So maybe you save yourself having to pay that, I don't know, 29 cents at Tesco. And then the next one is this one. That person can balance rulers. I don't know how many those are, but that is quite impressive, isn't it? But I think these talents are kind of pointless and useless. They do look impressive, but I don't know if any employer will hire you because you can do those skills. Like when you're putting your CV, and then, what skills and talents do you have? What God-given gifts do you have? And you say, I can hold a dozen eggs with one hand. I don't, it's impressive, but I think it's kind of pointless. But it got me thinking a little bit. In the church, when it comes to spiritual gifts that God gives to the church, are there some useless spiritual gifts? Are there some talents that we can kind of look at and say, come on now. Technology, we don't need that. Stacking chairs, we don't need that. Like, are there some talents we can pick and choose and prefer certain talents and downgrade the other ones? Anyway, so to answer that question, we are going to go to Romans chapter 12. We're going to read the 8 verses in Romans chapter 12, and we'll explain as we go. So maybe you can look it up in your physical Bibles, or you can look it up in your apps, or even just on screen. So therefore, this way you look at it, trying to find out the place. All right, so we begin with therefore. And if you remember from the sermon last week, anytime you see the therefore, you need to ask the question, why is the therefore? Therefore. It's quite corny, but it actually works, right? So therefore, so we know that the therefore is there for a reason. And then the next bit tells us why it's there. So therefore, brothers and sisters, in view of the mercies of God. So if you know anything about the book of Romans, the first 11 chapters can be summarized with that phrase, mercies of God. Like it is just verses upon verses that are just telling us that God, in His mercy, came down and died on the cross for us so that we could be forgiven. It's not anything that we've done. And if you remember from Russell's preaching last week, right, he was talking about we become adopted into God's family. It's not anything that you've done. But now, when we get to chapter 12, the answer then becomes, so what? We are now adopted into God's family, so what are we to do? And that is always the question, and that's always the order, and the order is very important. God's mercies first, that's offered free, and then the behavior and the thinking comes after. Even think about the children of Israel when they were in slavery for about 400 years, right? For more than 400 years. God didn't come to them and say, do this and do that. What did He do? He rescued them from slavery, and then after He had rescued them, He gave them the 10 Commandments. And He said, thou shalt be nice. No, that's not a commandment, by the way. I'm just saying if you guys are tracking with me. Thou shalt not be nice is not a commandment. But you see the order. The order is very important. God's mercy comes first, and then after that, the behavior and the thinking that's aligned to God. So as we continue, so what? So now we've got God's mercy, what do? So I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. So I urge you is like I ask of you, I plead of you. Now that God has shown you so much mercy in your life, could you now go on and present your bodies as a living sacrifice? And bodies there is just talking about all of you, right? So not just including your physical body, but also your way of thinking, also your affections, everything that you love, all of you. You have to present it as a living sacrifice, and that's actually an oxymoron because sacrifices are usually dead. But for the Christian, it's living. So long as you're alive, now you bring your behavior and your thinking in your living as you live your daily life. For Christian, the last sacrifice was Jesus dying on the cross. After Jesus died on the cross, we don't need any more literal sacrifices. We don't need to bring goats and sheep and things like that, like in the Old Testament sacrificial system. So now present your body as a living sacrifice. That is holy. Holy just means set apart, and this is pleasing to God. And this is your true worship. So that this is your true worship. We're going to come back to that. But I just want to go on to the next verse and go, how do we present ourselves as a living sacrifice? And according to that verse, this is how we do it. Because again, Russell was saying, holiness goes from sort of like greater to less. So it's sort of like he starts off up here and then he narrows it. So he told us, to present ourselves to God as a living sacrifice. Now he's telling us exactly what it's going to look like. So he's narrowing down a little bit. So do not be conformed to this age. And this age is just talking about the way of thinking and behaving that is contrary to God. Like sometimes if you listen to the news, there is a way of thinking and there's a pattern of thinking that everybody just takes on. Getting drunk is okay. Living and cohabiting with your partner is okay without getting married. Everybody just takes on this way of thinking. And Paul is saying, do not be conformed to that way of thinking, but instead be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You need to think the way that God wants you to think. You need to think according to the Bible, so that you may discern what is good and what is good and pleasing and perfect will of God. So in essence, what he's saying, when I say we'll come back to the true worship, right thinking and behavior is your true worship. Or some of your translations might have is spiritual worship. I love a time of worship. We have about 25, 30 minutes of worshiping God. We pray, we sing. But sometimes we can think that is the only worship. That is only an aspect of worship. Even when we were worshiping, I was just kind of going around just seeing that everything was all right. And I was even in the crash, and I saw one of the youths that just being the person in crash minding the kids, that is true worship. As well as singing. Right? So we shouldn't just relegate it to just the 20 minutes on Sunday, but it is everything that we do. And Paul now, he's going to narrow it down further, and we go to verse 3. So remember I said he's narrowing down, right? And now he's going to tell us exactly what he wants us to be thinking about. For by the grace given to me, I tell you, everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he should think. Instead, think sensibly. Remember, he starts with that renewing your mind, right? And then he's talking about think sensibly. Think rightly in a way that accords with God's ways. And we'll see exactly what he wants us to think rightly about. But let me just explain that phrase there. For by the grace given to me, the grace given to him there is apostleship. You can see the same phrase in Romans chapter 1, verse 5. So the grace given to him is as an apostle. And as an apostle, he's telling every one of you. So anytime you see the word everyone in the New Testament, say even me. Right? So even you. This applies to you. Not to think of yourself more highly. So what is he calling for here? He's calling for humility. He's calling for humility. Now the question is, why is he calling for humility? And for that, we'll go to the next verse. So just to finish off verse 3 there. Instead, think sensibly as God has distributed a measure of faith to each one. So we should think rightly because God has given us a measure of faith. And as we go to verse 6, according to the grace given to us, we have different gifts. If prophecy, use it according to the proportion of one's faith. So verse 3 and verse 6, what he's trying to tell us is the gifts that you have, the spiritual gifts that you have been given by God. But as we're human beings, sometimes we try and boast. So we say, yeah, God gave me the gift, but the faith to exercise that gift. So this is not saving faith. This is just faith to exercise that gift. We can boast and say, this is my faith. But Paul's saying, no. The gift and the faith to exercise the gift is all given by God. So if you prophesy, even that confidence and courage and belief to go, this is from God and this is the word from God that I have for you, Paul is saying, even that is given by God. So if you think rightly about that your faith to exercise the gift and the gifts are given by God, it should make you humble. So it should not make you think more highly than you ought. You shouldn't think just because you are a preacher in front of people, then you are more higher than everybody else. You should actually think clearly, no, this gift has been given by God, and even the faith to exercise it. But as I look around this room, I think sometimes we might be on the opposite end of humility. What I mean by this is sometimes we don't understand humility. We think humility is thinking lowly of yourself. So like a low self-esteem. But that's not it. If somebody says to Michael Jordan, were you a great basketball player? We might think that being humble is saying, no, I wasn't a great basketball player. But that's actually not true. The humility is actually, yes, I was a great basketball player. I was given these gifts and I worked hard. That's thinking clearly. When I just come, I want to say maybe my second or third week from Zimbabwe. I went to secondary school. I was 17. I was doing my leaving cert. You know when you're just new in a place. And then at lunchtime, they played football. and I can play, right? Thinking straightly, I can play a bit of football, right? And then the people were choosing teams. And they came to me and they said, "Oh, Oz, can you play?" And then I thought, oh, the right way to respond, the right way to be humble is to downplay, the fact that I could play. And I said, no, I'm not really that good. And guess what? I didn't get chosen. but then after it's like, no, that's not the right way to respond. The right way to respond with humility was, yes, I can play. I can play a bit of football. So there's a writer, did I miss this one? C.S. Lewis, he says that humility is not thinking less of yourself. So true humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. There's a distinction, right? So true humility is not thinking of yourself less. Don't have low self-esteem. But think less of yourself. So as I look out, some of you have been blessed with many gifts, but you don't feel like you can exercise them. You don't feel that you're good enough to exercise them. You think that other people should exercise these gifts. But even some of you in your everyday lives, some of you are managers, some of you like when it comes to your house, it's so clean because you know how to handle stuff. But when it comes to church, you just downplay yourself and say, no, I'm being humble and I don't have that many gifts. But here, Paul is telling you, we should think of ourselves, of our spiritual gifts in the right way. So God has gifted you, and according to the passages we looked at, God is gifted every single Christian. So if you're a Christian, you've been gifted by God. So utilize your spiritual gifts. And the next question is, what are the spiritual gifts for? Remember, we started with the useless gifts. If we have these spiritual gifts, right, and they play no purpose, then they really are useless gifts. So what do we make of spiritual gifts? So if we go to verse 4, 5, and 6. Now, as we have many parts in one body, and all the parts do not have the same function, in the same way, we who are many are one body in Christ, and individually members of one another. According to the grace given to us, we have different gifts. If prophecy, use it according to the proportion of one's faith. One thing that I want us to grasp from these verses is the gifts that you have, they are not for you. They are for the church. So when you're not exercising your gift, you're actually withholding a gift that's not yours. That was not meant for you. It was really meant for the health and growth of the church. Because, you see, we depend on each other. I might be good in one area, but I'm terrible in another area. But in that area, I don't have to worry about it because somebody else who's more gifted than me can come and operate in that space. But if we withhold our gifts from the church is poorer for it. Sometimes we might think it doesn't make that much of a difference, but it does. Like your gift is invaluable to this church. It's not useless. Don't think of it as small. As small as it is, in your thinking, it is massive. You guys know these guys over here, the next picture. As I try to acclimatize and familiarize myself with the West, the family were taking a road trip, so we went to, I'll probably butcher this, Aui Caves? Is it Aui Caves? Aui Caves? Aui Caves. Right, you get it right. So I went to Aui Caves, and I learned an astonishing fact. I did not know this. Vultures are going extinct. So when we were there, they made this whole plea about vultures are going extinct. And I was sitting there, I was like, so what? And them birds are ugly. I'm like, so what, right? If we start a GoFundMe page and one of them is a panda going extinct, or is a vulture going extinct, we're going, man, the panda needs to stay, right? And the vulture needs to go. But then, they started telling us the function of the vulture. Do you know that vultures are the Dyson Hoover of the environment? Like, if you don't have vultures, then you're going to have dead carcasses all over the savannah. Right? You're going to have all these dead animals all over the place. And because of that, there's going to be loads of diseases that will affect animals and people. So the whole ecosystem is out of whack because these ugly birds are going missing. Like, right, they won't win any beauty contest, right? But even the things, right, even the things we think is ugly, right, I'm just joking, they're not ugly, right? The boat neck, it's got a purpose, so that it pierces into the carcass and it can come out without getting stuck, with its feathers not getting stuck. It's got acid, it's in its stomach, so that it can kill those bacteria and diseases. So you see, even the vulture is vital to the ecosystem. So, I mean, you have gifts, and you might think you're a vulture, but you're not. But even if you are vital. So your gift is invaluable. So please do not withhold your gift from the church. Remember I said this sermon is going to be about how the church really ticks. The honest truth is, if we don't have people utilizing these spiritual gifts, things fall apart. This is the honest truth. The church gets healthy and its mission progresses when people exercise the spiritual gifts within the church. So today it's a little bit of a recruitment drive, really, which is an appeal to you guys to use your gifts. So if you look underneath your seats, you will see these connect cards. We're using them for all multi-purposes, right? If you want, cheerfully, not under compulsion, if you feel you're gifted in a certain area, just write it down there, just put it in the welcome box or in the collection box, and then, we will, come to you and put you in teams where you can exercise your gifts, because they are very valuable to the things that we're doing here. We need to exercise it. So, one of the areas that we have, so if we just go back, actually that's a good one, I should say that, skipped it. So all spiritual gifts are given to us. All spiritual gifts God has given to us are needed for the health and mission of the church. You see, when you go to different churches, God will give them all sorts of different spiritual gifts, but the mix that we have in this church is the right mix that we have for this church. And it's really vital and valuable for the health of the church. And some of the areas you can maybe think of serving in the next slide. These are some of the areas. These are not exhaustive, right? There is more. So there's even more things you can think of, just come and talk to us. Cleaning, creche, children, and we're talking about youth. Welcoming, music, technology, tea and coffee. All these areas need people who can exercise their gifts in these areas. And then now, when we transition, I guess I just want to make a distinction here, like on the next slide, of we have various gifts, and we'll look at what those various gifts are. But we all should have the fruits of the Spirit. So the fruits of the Spirit are common to everyone. Right? So the fruit of the Spirit are this, right, from Galatians chapter 5, verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. And on the next slide, gentleness and self-control. The law is not against such things. So all Christians, whatever level you are, you should be growing in these things. And these are common to all. God's spiritual gifts vary. Remember, God is the one who gives the spiritual gifts for the need of the church. So God varies them. So for some of you, you can sing. For some of you, you're good in tea and coffee, you're good in welcoming people. So we've got various gifts. But the commonalities, they're all given by God. So when you go to the next slide, so that's verse 6. According to the grace given to us, we have different gifts. And then he's going to list these 7 gifts. This is not exhaustive. There is more than this. When you go to other parts of the Bible, you see more gifts. And even all those gifts in the Bible are not exhaustive either. There is more you can add on top of that. We have different gifts. If prophecy, use it according to the proportion of one's faith. You know, that faith is given by God to exercise it. If service, use it in service. If teaching, in teaching. If exhorting, in exhorting. Giving with generosity. Leading with diligence. Showing mercy and cheerfulness. It kind of sounds a little bit obvious, but I'm going to name an obvious thing here. If you've been gifted in teaching, teach. I know it sounds easy to say, right? But there will be trouble if you are trying to serve in somewhere where you're not really gifted in. Right? If you don't like children, it's probably not a good thing. Yeah, you might need to talk to your therapist about why you don't like children. But if you don't like children, I don't think creche is for you. Right? I don't think that's your gifting. You know, if you don't like people, I don't think welcoming them is a good thing either. Right? I know it's like obvious, but people miss this, and it is vital. And there's even there's this guy called. If you go to the next slide. So this is just a person who observes things, right? He observes things. So it's not even like from the Bible directly, but he's really, what he's doing is ripping it from the Bible. But he's observed that there's a guy called Patrick Lencioni. He's good in team management and productivity. And he figured out that people who utilize their God-given talents are much more fulfilled. You know, because when you exercise something that God has gifted you in, you're energized. Like when I teach, I get energized. I was even saying like to the Bible study on Wednesday, I said, oh man, I missed this because we haven't had it for 2 weeks and I just love teaching the Bible. But when it comes to administration, whoo, I'm like, God, thank you for Carol, right? Carol helps me with that. So things that that energize you. And then it goes in teams, or you can put churches that help people to tap into their God-given talents are more successful and productive. And basically, he's just really taking it from the Bible. I don't know if he knows it or not. I think he does. He's just taking it from the Bible. Of if you exercise the gifts that God has given you in the right area, then the church will be healthy and grow and flourish. And the mission of the church goes out there. You don't have me trying to lead worship. That would be a bad thing. A really bad thing. So then you might be here and you will be saying to yourself, how can I know what my gifting is? That's a good question. How do I know what my gifting is? You might also even be saying to yourself, how do I know what a spiritual gift is and what a natural gift is? You know, just your natural proclivities, you're born with it. And so the first one too, how can you know what your spiritual gift is? You can go online and there, you know, a lot of Christian organizations that have put like good tests that you can take, these questionnaires, that will help you with that. But I really think the fastest and easiest way that you can do this is to just start by serving. And as you start serving in a certain area, you just feel like you're energized as you do it. As you serve in a certain area, you hear the people going, you should do that some more. I don't know what you did there, you should do that some more. But if you're maybe serving in an area where it's like a chore, like I don't want to go to church today because I've got to face those kids. Maybe kids ministry is not the area. So just trial them. And as to the question of spiritual gift to natural ability, I'll tell you what makes a spiritual gift. When you exercise it for the good of the church. That's the qualification, right? So it's from God, even the natural gift is from God, but when you exercise it for the betterment of the church, now that's a spiritual gift. And one thing that we know is God gives good gifts. So when we go back to an earlier question of, are there any useless, pointless spiritual gifts in the church? I hope the answer is like obvious now, right? They're all useful. You know, it's not like, I know Christmas is coming around. I used to hear this time of when Christmas comes around, and then you do the Secret Santa thing, right? And then they say, oh, you've just got 10 euros a maximum. You can't go above that. So with 10 euros, you can't really buy anything. So everybody buys these pointless gifts from the Euro shop. And then you have to open them in front of people and then fake a smile. Ah, this is so nice. And then you throw it in the bin. That's not the giftings that God has given us. As I close, I hope you understand that your giftings are valuable, that you shouldn't withhold them from the church. But I want to close with this story. This actually happened. So history tells of a story of a man who walked up in church. And this man was not known to the preacher because the preacher was a traveling preacher. So we didn't know this man. But as this man walked in, everybody knew who this man was because they had been praying for this man for decades that he would come to know Christ. And on that day, as the preacher preached, the gospel broke through and he became a Christian. And then afterwards he was talking to the pastor. And usually when people become Christian, right, it's joy, it's rejoicing. But this older gentleman just started to cry. And then the pastor couldn't get why was he crying? This is a lovely thing. And then he kept repeating the same words over and over and over again. Sobbing, he kept saying, I have wasted it. I have wasted it. I have wasted it. And this is what he kept saying over and over and over. And then when the preacher's trying to ascertain, what have you wasted? And he felt like, I have wasted my life. All these years that I could have been serving God, I didn't get to serve God. For you, as you hear that story, if you're a Christian, God has gifted you with so many gifts. Let that not be you at the end of your life as you reflect and you say, I have wasted the gift that God has given me. I could have been serving the church, advancing the mission of the church, making the church stronger and healthier. But I was just thinking lowly of myself. Or I was too proud, so I did not utilize my gift. So I really hope that this encourages you guys to utilize your gifts because that's really how the church takes